Now, there is something I want to call out in this scene. Cypher is eating eggs, hard-boiled eggs. It's kind of weird. He's just sitting there peeling a hard-boiled egg.
In a restaurant.
Just 3 hard-boiled eggs come out on a silver plate, and he offers one to Harry.
Would you like an egg?
And Harry says, no, I have a thing about chickens.
No, thank you. I got a thing about chickens.
Seems like a weird thing to bring up.
Ben would love this movie because he hates chickens.
And Cypher makes a comment that says a lot of people think eggs are a metaphor for the soul. We're just kind of left to chew on that. Not the egg, but the line.
Pump, 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 pump. That's the sound of our beating hearts beating all over your ears. That sounded weird. My name is James.
And I'm Nick.
And welcome to the Just Play It podcast. I just kind of said that right out my ass.
Hey, I love it.
Thank you.
Everything's live here. Nothing's scripted.
No, except for this prepared report we have of the movie we are reviewing this week. This movie is called Angel Heart, and it's from 1987. This movie was brought to the Just Play It table by Nicholas DeGicolis himself.
So this is one of those movies that I'd seen before a long time ago. Probably I was maybe 10 or 11. Not a movie for a 10 or 11-year-old.
No.
But I do remember seeing snippets of this and saying, hey, this was a good movie. In my 10-year-old brain, this was a good movie. I remembered nothing of it. I just remembered checking it off in my head as Angel Heart, good movie. And then I never went back and watched it. And so when we started this podcast, I thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to revisit it.
Well, I'm glad you brought it to the table. This movie is directed by Alan Parker, who also directed Mississippi Burning, a couple Pink Floyd and Madonna music videos.
I looked him up, and we don't have to get deep into it, but he had a really interesting life. He was kind of a blue-collar guy and worked in marketing and then chased his dreams as a director and made it all the way to Angel Heart.
Good on him. And he directed Mickey Rourke, Robert De Niro, and Lisa Bonet in this movie.
This is going to be an interesting movie because it's not a very large cast.
There's a lot of characters in it, like red herrings and side characters and dead bodies. This movie is like a murder mystery detective story. Mickey Rourke, I gotta say, I recognize him nowadays because of Iron Man 2 and The Expendables. I never really got into his earlier work, and boy howdy, does he look like a completely different person because of his plastic surgeries.
I know there was also some drug use. He's definitely had a resurgence in his career, which is great. And I think that started kind of around Sin City. Then he did The Wrestler. He was in Iron Man 2.
Yeah, that's the Mickey Rourke I recognize. When I saw the beginning of this movie, I don't know about you or if because we just watched The Fifth Element, but I thought he looked a lot like Bruce Willis.
Big Bruce Willis with hair vibes. Yeah.
Yes.
Young Mickey Rourke is a handsome looking dude.
Great looking guy and a really good actor, I thought, in this movie.
Wonderful. We'll get into that a little later.
Why don't you let us know about the budget and the return on this movie?
Yeah, so this one had a budget of only $18 million and ended up grossing only $17.2 million. So it came in with a bit of a loss at the box office. I think what's surprising to me, it very much felt like an indie film. And so the budget of $18 million makes sense to me. Even for the actors you have, right? Lisa Bonet is currently a star on The Cosby Show. Mickey Rourke, Robert De Niro. So I don't know how much they paid these actors, but that's kind of a surprisingly low budget, even for 1987 for me.
We'll get into this later, but maybe the subject matter and the compelling story may have just drew these actors to it. Because Lisa Bonet is a very free spirit. She's a bit of a weirdo in a really good way. And this movie's weird. It gets weird.
It does get weird.
This movie is based on a book, and I don't know what the book is called, if it's the same title.
We're not a book podcast, James.
No, we don't read. So this movie is based on a book, and it is on the big screens known as Angel Heart from 1987. I will read the log line for this movie. A private investigator is hired by a man who calls himself Louis Cypher to track down a singer named Johnny Favorite, but the investigation takes an unexpected and somber turn.
Ooh.
Accurate logline.
Damn straight. So with that, I think it's time for us to get ourselves into a little bit of plot talk.
Plot talk. We open up on a gritty alley in New York. It's 1955 specifically. There's some sweet jazz music going. This alley, there's actually a dead body.
Yeah.
And there's a murdered old lady. And I'm like, okay, who's that? I don't think we actually even get into that at all.
I wonder if it's just scene setting. There's murder afoot.
Strap in. You're in a gritty noir film.
Yes. That's the best explanation.
So we get into daytime. We go to the private detective office of our main character, Harry Angel, played by Mickey Rourke. We'll be following him and his journey trying to solve a case that is bequeathed to him by a character named Louis Cypher, who is played by Robert De Niro. He gets a hold of Harry Angel and wants him to solve a missing persons case.
Real quick, James. There was a lawyer who was involved in this meeting between these three characters. Did you recognize him at all?
Oh, snap. I am famous for recognizing faces, but I didn't clock them.
So this is Dan Florek. The only reason I know him is because I love the show that he's most famous for. He is the captain in Law and Order SVU.
Oh, yeah. I know this guy.
Yep.
So that's the problem. I didn't watch SVU, but my sister did, and you did. So I've definitely seen clips of SVU. It was on TV, and that I do recognize this guy now.
Yep, Captain Cragen. A skinnier Captain Cragen, younger man.
Yeah, and he played a small role in this. Not
Very.
really a whole lot to him. His name was Herman Weinsap.
You had a Jewish lawyer in there just because.
Just because, New York, 80s. And we meet Robert De Niro. Mickey Rourke goes all the way up to Harlem. He works out of an office in a church, or at least in a facility that shares a church with it.
Yeah, the upstairs room of a church.
I didn't know if we were going to get into it more, but it seemed like the pastor downstairs was very money grabby and shady. He's like, donate to me if you want to see me running around in a Rolls Royce. I'm like, no, why would I do that?
I don't want to see my pastor in a Rolls Royce. I want to be in a Rolls Royce.
Harry goes upstairs. He meets with Cypher, and he's pronouncing his name Louis Cypher or Cypher, and Robert De Niro's character makes it a point to say Cypher. He's leaving a little hint about who he really is.
I thought that was a pretty obvious hint.
It was a pretty obvious
Louis
hint.
Cypher. It's the devil.
It's the devil.
It's the devil.
I'll tell you what, Nick. A freaking thumbnail kind of ruined this for me. It's not really ruining it too much because it's kind of obvious that he is the devil with a name like Louis Cypher, Lucifer.
Yeah.
The way he's freaking dressed and his evil demeanor.
The long pointy nails.
The creepy long pointy nails, the slick back hair, all black hair. I think he had a soul patch or at least some sort of evil goatee going on. He's rocking a cane. But there was a thumbnail when I was renting this movie, and it was Robert De Niro with glowing yellow eyes. And I was like, oh, I guess there's some mythical elements to this movie or some demonic themes. And as soon as we walk in and he says, I'm Louis Cypher, I'm like, okay, well, Robert De Niro plays the devil. That came together real quick for me.
It's pretty on the nose. You could tell the movie wasn't trying to hide it too much. And I think that's going to be a theme with the movie in a way. There's a lot of stuff that they really lead you to believe or lead you to finding out. It's kind of the opposite of some of the other movies with plot twists that we've talked about in the end, before on this podcast where, we give you all the information at the end. And some movies like Minority Report give you information throughout. And then this movie gives you a lot of information up front.
This is a mystery movie. Cypher hires Harry to find a man named Johnny Favorite, who is a singer. He owes Cypher a debt. And the debt, this is another obvious clue that he's the devil. It was walking in, Louis Cypher looks evil. I saw the glowing yellow eyes in the thumbnail. And the fourth clue was he owed me a debt when he died. I was like, oh, he sold his soul.
Yep.
To the devil for something.
Yes.
Maybe it was to become rich and famous. Spoiler alert. That's exactly what it is.
Usually is. It's usually why people sell their soul to the devil.
So Johnny, he was a famous entertainer, and he is supposedly dead. Cypher doesn't quite believe it. Johnny Favorite was placed in a psych hospital after the war. He was shipped overseas as an entertainer, not as a soldier.
Mm-hmm. He got like half his face blown off or something.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
And they set this up saying Johnny Favorite has face reconstruction and amnesia from this attack. So you're thinking, oh, okay, that's convenient for finding a missing persons because they look different and they don't know who they are.
Right.
Okay, this is going to be a tough case for our boy Harry Angel, but he's being offered a lot of money by Cypher to take on this job.
Yeah, at this point, we also learned that Harry was in the war for a short period of time. He was a soldier, and he suffered from shell shock, kind of similar, basically the warplace PTSD / amnesia / psychosis. It was kind of a catch-all for soldiers returning from the war. Harry being a soldier will be important at a certain point. So Harry does accept the job, and he heads to the psych hospital upstate where this guy was sent after the war. So surprise, surprise, since this movie is 2 hours long, he doesn't find him in the first location. So he basically sweet talks his way. This is a theme for Harry Angel. He's a charmer, almost to the point where he's a little creepy.
I wrote down there's a lot of women gazing by Harry.
Yeah. Could just be a 1950s guy, how he treats women, very objectifies.
Yeah. He stares at a lot of women in a creepy way.
So he charms the lady who works the front desk into finding out more about this Johnny Favorite character, whether he was at this hospital, is he still here? Where did he go? He is not there, but he was transferred out in 1943, it says. But there's this whole thing. It's written in ballpoint pen. They didn't use ballpoint pen in the 40s. That's kind of the height of his real fine detective work. The rest of it's a lot of just digging up clues and searching. But the doctor who wrote this note, his name is Albert Fowler. So now it's time to track down the doctor, which does not take long. He looks him up in a phone book, and Harry breaks into his house, and it's kind of this beat up, dingy shack, and he finds a ton of opioids in there. So this doctor is clearly an addict. He's old. It's just he's not in a good place.
I was thinking, why would you break into this fool's house to question this guy? You're totally in the wrong. And then he finds the opioids, and it's like, okay, he has that against the doctor now.
Yeah, and he doesn't trust the doctor anyway, because this patient disappeared under his care. So he already knows something funky's going on with this Johnny Favorite guy. So the doctor comes home while Harry is in the house, and Harry basically makes himself known and interrogates him. And the doc essentially admits to releasing Johnny to a Southern man named Edward Kelly for $25,000. And then he falsified the records to make it say that Johnny was still around and transferred off. Basically helped spin the yarn that Johnny's no longer there. But he basically let him go. Harry wants more information, but he's going to leave the doctor there to detox, kind of as a form of torture. And he goes, I'm going to run out, get a cheeseburger, and I'll be back.
He does that. He does not lie. He gets his cheeseburger.
And as he's walking out and around the city, he walks by a church. And he hears this calling of his name. And he goes to the front of the church. And at this point, we've seen a lot of churches already. We know that the devil's involved. So we're like, all right, we got some push-pull, good versus evil, God versus the devil.
Religion is a strong theme throughout. And it is echoing this whisper voice that we hear in the beginning that says, Johnny, something's funky afoot.
Yes, something is very funky afoot. And Harry knows that and ends up turning away from the church, walks away. He goes back to the doctor's house. He walks in, and what does he find? The doctor has killed himself.
With a gun, shot in the head.
Boom. Harry, freaking out, obviously. He just walked in on a dead body and does the most sensible thing you could do, wipe his prints from ever being at the house and get the hell out of Dodge.
He meets back up with Cypher to tell him the news. He's kind of making a decision I would make, like, hey, I don't know if I really want to be involved in this because I've been on the case for 8 hours and somebody just killed themselves on the job already, and I may possibly be a murder suspect. I'm out. And Cypher's like, not for $5,000, you're not. And ups the payday for Harry. And Harry's like, okay, I'll keep going.
Money talks. Money
Yeah.
talks.
And he also says something to Harry when they first met. He does shake his hand and say, I feel like I've met you before. It's trying to make you really think about one thing or lean one way about a conspiracy. That'll all come to fruition at the end.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, I wonder what that was supposed to mean.
Harry's next step is he goes to a bar and meets with an informant he knows. I couldn't tell if maybe she worked for...
Is this a hooker?
She may have worked for a paper because she said something about my boss doesn't want to cover the story anymore.
Oh,
it's very ambiguous what she does.
I thought she was a hooker because they go into a room and she starts getting undressed and it doesn't seem romantic. It seems like a business exchange with the sexy time.
She could be both.
She could definitely be both. I didn't know if she was, yes, an informant and a hooker on the side, but it was very cheeky the way they did this expository scene. She is dumping so much information at once to the audience while getting naked. And I didn't know if that was on purpose. Like, oh, we're going to distract the viewer with exposed skin and bodies and boobies. And we're going to lay out all this information. She's also saying it in a very funny way, very matter of fact. Like she's writing in her diary. She's like, Johnny was in a band called the Spider Orchestra. Spider Simpson was the orchestra leader. He's in Harlem now. There was also a guitar player named Toots Sweet. And she's giving all this information that will be relevant. It just sounded like someone rambling on about a story and you don't care. And I don't know if that was an intentional thing because they're giving you so much information and maybe they want the audience to miss something. But I feel like you would want the audience to acknowledge all that information because she says a lot.
She sets up the direction for the rest of the film with this information.
Yeah, I had to rewind it. I had to put on the subtitles and I had to pause it and write all this stuff down because this is all relevant information.
Yeah, I didn't really notice that before you brought that up, but it was very weird that they had so much information being revealed in such a nonchalant scene. It is also interesting because usually in Hollywood, when we see like a sex scene, the focus is usually like the sex in the sex scene. And in this one, the sex scene was secondary to the information being shared. I
don't know how you're supposed to remember all that in one viewing when she's rattling off that information, but there it is. There's all your evidence.
There's the information.
Harry goes off to the beach and
to Coney Island to look for this palm reader, Madame Zora.
And is there like just like two random people there that know about her?
Well, it looks like at that time of year, maybe Coney Island's closed. I'm not sure if we know what time of year it is, but it's definitely, there's no one on the pier or the beach. And so Harry goes down to the beach. Somebody up on the pier said, you can go talk to that guy. And he's on the beach. This was a really funny exchange. I actually really enjoyed this scene.
I wrote down a quote that I'm going to use in my day-to-day life.
Is it the rat quote?
No, but remind me, what was that?
He goes, what do you do in the summer? He goes, bite the heads off of rats. And Mickey Rourke goes, well, then what do you do in the winter? And he goes, still bite the heads off of rats.
Oh!
And they both chuckle. Like it was like a very...
I didn't get it.
They were like both laughing, joking, and it was a very organic conversation, like just two dudes fucking with each other. Like they both understand. They're both kind of chuckling throughout the conversation. I really liked the scene. But tell me the thing you're going to say.
Well, I think this scene, is this like a husband and wife?
Yes.
Okay, so the husband's on the beach, kind of sunbathing. He's wearing a nose protector. I don't even know what that is. Is that like what was before sunblock?
For the nose, I guess.
Yeah, that was kind of funny.
Because Harry wears it the rest of the film.
He wears it for like the next half of the film. And I'm like, why is he wearing this thing? I don't even know what this thing is. So the wife is in the water, and I think it's just a mystery murder trope of introducing random characters and leaving red herrings with who they are and why they know information and what they say. But the quote that the lady in the water says, she's giving information on where Madame Zora is. She says,
hey, did you ever hear of a Margaret Kruzmark?
Don't be a gazoony, fella.
And I'm like, I'm definitely stealing that. I'm going to tell people, Don't be a Gazoonie. I don't even know what that means.
Madame Zora was Margaret Krusemark.
So, Margaret Krusemark, a.k.a. Madame Zeroni, just kidding, Zora, is in Louisiana. We're going to Louisiana now.
And honestly, this is where the rest of the film takes place. So we've been in New York up to this point. We find out we got to go to Louisiana, and we hop on a train with Harry.
Harry finds Margaret, and he does this a lot. He poses as an everyday guy, a Joe Schmo, what detectives would do. They're not like, I'm a detective and I want to interview you about this. He says, I want to get my palm read. It's either it goes off without a hitch, he doesn't get made, or most of the time in this movie, it kind of falls apart and unravels. And I don't know if it's because he's rushing it or if because that's how the plot needs it to be, but it ends up being revealed that he's a detective and people are like, you should leave. I don't want to talk to you.
He reveals it himself. Yeah. He gets the person he's fooling comfortable, and then he tries to hit him real quick with the element of surprise.
Yes. So she's a palm reader, and allegedly Johnny would go to her to get his fortune read. And he's questioning her about Johnny. She's claiming that he's dead and she does not like him for whatever reason. Actually, it's because of what that hooker said, because I think he stood her up at a prom or something. It was in that speech or that information dump in that earlier scene. What's on her necklace here, Nick? I see you have a little note.
Yeah, she has the same kind of upside down star, almost pentagram symbol on her necklace as Cypher has on his ring. And they definitely make it prominent.
Right. And that's another kind of really hard on the nose. There's a picture of her dad back in the information dump scene. The lady says, Ethan's the father. He owns half of Louisiana. She met Johnny at a prom. Johnny, quote verbatim, Johnny shit on her and went back home to daddy. That's kind of like the little breadcrumbs about Margaret's timeline and her involvement with this. Actually, Toots Sweet, the guitar player, she says Toots Sweet was engaged to Margaret. So there's also a little bit of a triangle there with Toots Sweet and Johnny and Margaret, where in that info dump, the lady says that Johnny and Toots were good friends, and Toots and Margaret were engaged, and Johnny would go to Margaret for palm readings. So we're setting up some complicated relationships. The hooker's name is Connie. I wrote that down. I'll stop disrespecting her and I'll call her Connie. When I said there's a lot of women gazing, and the one that's voluntarily getting naked in front of him, he appears to have no interest in, which I thought was interesting. Maybe he only likes it if it's forbidden or he doesn't have it.
Part of the chase.
Yeah, I was like, maybe Harry is not such an angel. But
So now it's time to hunt down, again, another so now transition. So now
we need to find someone else.
So this change, of course, is to go find Evangeline Proudfoot,
who was the secret lover of his.
Voodoo lover.
It is pointed out that she was African-American.
So we're going into a part of Louisiana here in New Orleans area, very historically black. So we're getting to a lot of these, 1950s Louisiana communities.
And remember, this is 1955. So in the South, we are in the Jim Crow era.
Yes. When he's on the bus, there's a coloreds only sign over some of the seats. I will give Harry Angel his due. He participated in none of the racism. He seemed like a gentleman to everybody he met.
He's from New York.
So he finds out from a lady in town that Evangeline Proudfoot is dead, but he's going to go investigate anyway. And it leads him to a small Louisiana town. And actually, he ends up, by pure happenstance, meeting her daughter, Epiphany, who has a baby. They make it a point to say that she doesn't know who the dad is, and it's almost like an immaculate conception, this baby is. She's like, I don't know who the daddy is. He's just it's just like a miracle baby. But this leads us to another dead end.
He's also wearing the nose protector in this scene as well. He's still wearing it, and it scares the baby.
It does scare the baby. Poor baby.
Because it's like Harry's wearing a disguise.
Wink, wink.
Yeah, so another dead end with Epiphany.
We got one more lead.
Who's the next name on the list from Connie's information essay to me, who all happen to be in Louisiana conveniently? That'll be Mr. Toots Sweet. He goes down to a show that he's playing at some sort of bar or a club.
A little jazz blues club.
Kind of like a B.B. King type character, just plucking the guitar, is like real sick with it.
So fun fact,
Yeah.
This actor who played Toots, Brownie McGee, it seems that he's actually a blues guitarist. He doesn't have many credits, but his
Makes
credits have been
sense.
for soundtracks for some blues music, and he also played a blues guitarist in another film that actually it was a recognizable film. I don't have it in front of me, and I'm forgetting it right now. Hopefully, he was playing it live.
As a Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Is that what you're seeing?
I just Googled Toot Sweet. Brownie McGee. Oh, Adventures in Babysitting? No, that's a soundtrack. The Jerk?
The Jerk.
It says blues singer. Yeah.
In The
Steve
Jerk.
Martin.
Yep.
Like I
This
feel
is
like I would see this guy at the blues festival downtown, you know?
This is a blues man.
And we hit another point in the movie where Harry wants to question Toots about Johnny, and he kind of forces the conversation that way and says, "Oh, like I saw you in New York, and you were playing with a guy named Johnny Favorite, was it?" And Toots is like, "Oh yeah, I kind of remember playing with that guy." And then he kind of forces the questioning more, like, "Oh, can you tell me more about him?" And he's like, "Oh, look, man, I gotta go play." And then he's like, "Ah, shit, I didn't get the information." Then he pins this guy in the frickin' bathroom, and Toots is like, dude, get away from me. I don't want to talk to you. Like, leave it alone. So Harry has a really good quality of pissing people off with this questioning.
Except this time he gets thrown out by a bouncer.
What? Wait, but there's a chicken foot in the bathroom. What was that about? Did he just find that on the urinal?
I believe it was Toots's. I want to say it was similar to like having a rabbit's foot.
Okay, I was going
Like
to say
like
that.
a petrified animal body part is part of the voodoo.
Lucky Charm.
Yeah, not 100% sure.
And he follows Toots to this really strange chicken sacrificing orgy that's happening off on the side of the road.
Voodoo
or
sex
like,
ritual, yeah.
like in someone's yard. It looks really down and dirty. Toots is there, and Epiphany is also there, partaking in this. And
Yes.
they don't necessarily say like it's a specific religion, but they do throw out the term voodoo,
Yes.
mama juju. So I don't know if it's just supposed to be generic witchcraft or if it was supposed to draw something from something specific. But they're sacrificing a chicken. Again, with the chickens, this must be something from the book that has a deeper meaning, because the chickens come up so often. The eggs, the chicken foot, the chicken sacrifice. There's hella chickens where Epiphany lives.
He's constantly running into chickens.
He doesn't fuck with these chickens unless their last name is Cutlets. Harry Angel.
Nice.
And then Nicki Minaj stole that from the book.
Eventually Harry.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm moving on.
Sorry, everybody.
I'm going to try a better transition, though. Well, there's no chickens in Toots' home, and that's where we go next. We can. Harry follows him all the way. Toots Sweets is like, "Why are you in my home?" Pulls out a razor. They get in a little bit of a tussle that Harry ends up getting the upper hand in. Gets his hand cut. He eventually gives Toots his hotel information, says, "If you can think of anything, let me know." And then he goes back to his hotel and has this really vivid dream of himself holding the razor blade that Toots had, and all of a sudden his body's just covered in blood.
His whole front clothes are just
Soaked.
smothered in blood. And he goes up to this figure who is dressed in all black. This is the second time we've seen this figure. And before he can make contact with them, he wakes up. And we're like, okay, that was another dream sequence. Something symbolic with this religious looking figure dressed in like an all black nun attire. Turns out Toots is actually super dead. Nick, why don't you explain how he died? Because this is super unnecessary, and I don't want to say it.
Yeah, Harry wakes up to cops rummaging through his room. And the reason they're there was the hotel information that he wrote on the piece of paper and left with Toots. That's what Toots had left in his hand when he died. And he asked how he died, and they said asphyxiation. Except he got choked to death. He got his dick cut off and shoved down his throat.
So bad.
Somebody cut his dick off, stuffed it in his mouth, and choked him to death. Then they took to redecorating his apartment with the poor jerk's blood.
Horrific.
Wow. That got personal very quickly. And
Yes.
guess what? Harry's the prime suspect because he
Always.
was the last one with him. And I'm sure there was witnesses, and his hotel information was left behind with him the night he died.
At this point, Harry starts having more of his war flashbacks throughout the movie. Pretty naturally, like the flashbacks are getting stronger, more vivid. We're being shown more information. We see the outside of this building with red light coming from one window and screams.
There's also a lot of spinning fans throughout the movie. A lot of
spinning fans.
There's a spinning fan in the doctor's home. There's a spinning fan at this random bar that Harry is decompressing at. This flashback, the red window has a spinning fan.
It's a fan at Toots's house.
So there's fans everywhere. It's hot. It's hot out here in Louisiana. Toots is sweating his balls off, or maybe his dick off, and then he dies.
Oof. His next step is to go back and see Margaret. In Harry's mind, all the leads are dead. Toots is dead. Evangeline's dead. Her daughter doesn't know anything. Margaret has basically said, screw off. I don't know anything. So he has to go back to the Margaret lead. So he goes back there, goes into her office, her palm reading office, and she's dead. She's laying on a table, bloody mess.
Her chest is cut open, and there's a heart on the table. She got her heart cut out.
Yes. And at this point, we're saying everybody this guy talks to dies.
This is getting very suspicious.
We know he's connected with these deaths somehow. We're not quite sure exactly how. So Harry is now just kind of around town. I don't really know what he's trying to do at this point. He's kind of, everybody's dead. All of his leads are dead. He ends up getting jumped by these southern henchmen, and they sick their dog on him.
I think they work for Ethan, who is the father of Margaret, who is now dead, and they are very suspicious of Harry and don't like this guy. And he gets chased around. He gets chased into a big-ass chicken coop, something he's not down with.
Just chickens.
He fucking hates chickens. And
he is not a fan of the chickens.
It's like Indiana Jones. It's like, snakes. Why did it have to be snakes? Harry Angel famously says, chickens. Why did it have to be chickens? We all laugh.
We all do.
It's a classic moment in this movie.
Classic Harry and the chickens. Harry finds his way back to the small Louisiana town with Epiphany, and she now gives us a new piece of information that Johnny Favorite is her father. She actually knows a little bit more. When we first meet her, she says, I've never heard that name in my life, Johnny Favorite. And now Johnny Favorite is her father.
Robert De Niro is in town for some business in Baton Rouge.
He conveniently has a conference, yeah.
He has a pretty good line that I liked. He says, they say there's just enough religion in the world to make men hate one another, but not enough to make them love.
And I will say, it's not quite the religious push-pull that you might think as far as just like good and evil, right? Because there's obviously, we had kind of the Christian pastor. We obviously have Satan. And then we have this third voodoo magic that we don't necessarily know it's not really satanic. It's not what we view as like godly. It's definitely this third piece of the puzzle.
I think it's definitely a little bit more in line with satanic, with the animal sacrifices.
Absolutely, but it's definitely not in like the way that the classic demon.
Like, they're not sacrificing a goat. It's a chicken.
It's a chicken. They're not sacrificing humans, right? They're not murderers.
Or are they?
Could be.
He meets back up with Epiphany, and I don't know if he just needs a break and he just wants to kind of have a nice conversation with the only person that's alive now that he returned to and is not dead.
Can I bring something up?
Sure.
Real quick. Just going back to his conversation with Cypher. They also meet in a church. So the only time we've met with Cypher up to now is in a church. And Harry now is running on the theory that Johnny is alive and he is the one killing these people. Whatever Johnny's involved in, he's going back and killing all the folks of his past to make sure that, to save himself. And he believes that he's being framed. Harry is being framed for
by
these
Johnny's
murders. Correct.
Yeah. After all this crazy realization, I think he just wants to have a nice conversation and night out with Epiphany. And you're looking at Epiphany, Lisa Bonet, and you're thinking, gosh, she looks mighty young. Mickey Rourke is kind of like an average adult. This dude looks like he's 38 in this movie, and she looks like she's in high school. And that ends up being the case, so they kind of have a little odd sexy time and a lot of sexual tension between them. I gotta say, Nick, this is the moment where I kind of realized what was going on. I realized what the big reveal was at this moment. Harry says to Epiphany something along the lines of, "Oh, I wonder what your mom saw in a creep like Johnny Favorite." And I was like, well, you're a little bit of a creep because you're staring at all these women and now you're hanging out with a 17-year-old.
Yes.
We know that because the next thing that he asks Epiphany is, how old are you? And she says, I'm 17. This is where it's all come together with me because they drop hints about timelines and years. In the beginning, it said 1955. Cypher's story about Johnny Favorite being transferred 12 years ago. And you're like, okay, you're piecing together a timeline. Lisa Bonet is saying she's 17. He went off into the war. And then you're putting the pieces together about amnesia, deformed face. And I wrote down, are we getting Shutter Island did in my notes? And I wrote down, is Harry Johnny? Because I thought, wouldn't that be completely messed up if he met up with his unknowing daughter and hooked up with her? And guess what? We got Oldboy, ladies and gentlemen.
They really hammered the point home, and not to ruin the
Was that a pun?
No.
Harry hammered somebody in that scene, and it was Epiphany.
It happened. I don't really feel bad. I don't think we're spoiling anything because most people, if you watch this today, by this point in the film, you should realize that Harry is Johnny. So now you have two thoughts going on in your head, or three. You have three thoughts going on in your head. One, clearly Cypher knows this. So what's the end game? Your second thought is, how did this happen? Third thought is, for the love of God, do not bang your daughter. Please.
That would be my first thought. I definitely thought of that first. He starts having sex with Epiphany, and it transitions into a crazy blood rain sex montage. There's more spinning fans. There's elevator wheels. There's the weird flashback again.
And Epiphany looks in pain.
No pun intended, but we have hit a climax.
Nice.
After the sex, Harry punches a mirror, and they kind of do the trope of cigarette in the bed the next morning. Harry's smoking a ciggy. Epiphany is in the bathtub, kind of cleaning up the next day, and a couple cops roll up. The cops are asking him about Toots and more information about this, and who is this person that you're hanging out with right now.
Being asked about Margaret.
He leaves a hotel where he's staying with Epiphany and goes to find Ethan. So Ethan, it's revealed that he was the alias of Edward Kelly, who was that person who paid off the doctor $25,000 to kind of falsify the reports.
Yep.
He paid off the doctor and got Johnny Favorite. I gotta say, he pulls Ethan aside into like a shack. Ethan opens up about worshiping the devil awfully quickly. He kind of grills him for a couple questions, and he's like, it's not that bad. Like, don't call us voodoo. Like the Dark Lord he's crazy. You wouldn't believe it. You got to try it, Harry. And he's like, Johnny Favorite conjured Lucifer himself in my living room, and I was so delighted. And he's getting real Colonel Sanders with him.
I once watched him conjure up Lucifuge in my living room. He made a pact with Satan. He sold his soul.
Lord Satan rose from the dead. It was magnificent.
Except he thought he could outwit the Prince of Darkness. Johnny sold his soul.
And this is another information dump by Ethan. And this is another scene I had to rewind and take it all in, because this is where
Harry's freaking out the whole scene.
Yeah, Harry's getting a little delirious and he's getting a little insane right now. This case is literally driving him insane. He's having these crazy visions the closer he gets to all this material. And Ethan explains that Johnny sold his soul to the devil for stardom. And Harry's like, you expect me to believe that? You expect me to believe in all this voodoo bullshit? So Ethan says, he's explaining the story and says Johnny made a deal with the devil. His time was up and he wanted to escape death or
basically get out of the deal.
Falsify his identity by performing some satanic ritual. And they say this was in New York on New Year's Eve.
He needed a victim, someone his own age.
Why?
To steal their soul. So Toots and Johnny picked up a young soldier.
Who?
Just a boy, just a soldier out celebrating New Year's Eve in Times Square.
Who is this soldier?
Remember we said he was in the war and this would play a part later. So it turns out Harry Angel was the random soldier they picked up off the street, cut his chest open, took his heart out, and Johnny ate the heart.
Yeah, and assumed.
So I have a question. Is Mickey Rourke, the way he looks, is that how Johnny Favorite looked? And he just has Harry's identity? Or did the real Harry Angel actually look like Mickey Rourke Harry Angel?
It's Johnny Favorite's soul in Harry Angel's body.
But how? He cut out Harry Angel's heart and then ate it. So I thought he was assuming his soul in his body.
Well, that wouldn't make sense because Harry still knows people from, right, like Connie, who he clearly has known for a while.
This is kind of well into his adulthood. So if he got drafted when he was like 20 something and is claiming shell shock and amnesia, I don't think it's too far-fetched to kind of just start your life and pretend like you knew a lot of people or meet people on the job. And then you just assume you've known them for as long as you can remember, because as long as you can remember is only 10 years ago. And you don't really ask any questions about your childhood. I don't know how the psyche works.
Well, because they mentioned that he had Harry's memories. That's why Harry still believed he was Harry and didn't know he was Johnny.
Which is why I'm thinking Johnny Favorite is what Mickey Rourke looks like. And he just assumed Harry's soul. And we don't actually know what Harry looked like. He was just a rando dead body. Johnny ate his heart. And it basically, imagine it as identity theft, but with a soul. Imagine me, James Gordon. I'm like, I made a deal with the devil. I really wanted this podcast to take off. So I sold my soul. Oh shit, I'm going to go find a random person who the rules are have to be the same age as me. Hey, Joe Schmo off the street, I'm going to eat your heart. And then I still look like me, but I'm assuming this guy's identity on the street, which his name could be Carl. So now I'm thinking I'm Carl, but I still look like the OG perpetrator. But that opens up so many plot holes for me because it's like, why don't these people remember Johnny Favorite if he did look like that before?
Well,
or is that the whole
that his face
like reconstruction? You know, it's like he looks pretty good for having facial reconstruction
for the 50s.
For the 50s, that's some really good.
Which is why I think he assumed Harry Angel's body.
I just thought it was Johnny's body the whole time because of the facial surgery reconstruction and amnesia. But
I think that was a red herring, personally.
Maybe it's something they covered in the book, but this is the huge reveal. And Ethan says that they left the dog tags of the person that they killed and sacrificed for this ritual sealed in a vase back at Margaret's. And I thought, why would they need to do that? And I think it's just a plot device for the audience to have some sort of concrete evidence that it was Harry Angel who they killed and took the soul from. Harry's having a freak out, and now Ethan's dead in the gumbo.
He got drowned in the gumbo.
Ethan's dead in the gumbo. And Harry has this whole big reveal with Cypher. Like you mentioned before, it seems like Cypher knew this the whole time. So what was the plan? We can get into this into talking points if we want to wrap up the plot.
Yeah, so I'll just say this and we can dive into it afterwards as well. It can be one of two things. One is either it's torture. It's kind of the devil's sick torture game. Or basically he has to admit that it's Johnny's soul for him to be able to complete the deal with the devil, right? Complete the contract. He has to make him realize that you are Johnny, and now you have to honor the contract.
Okay, that makes sense. Because Cypher in this last scene seems pretty damn smug about the whole thing. He seems like, my big elaborate fuck you, Johnny plan went off without a hitch. And I will mention loving Mickey Rourke's performance in these last two freakout scenes. With Ethan and with Cypher, I was really feeling it for him.
You're trying to frame me. Cypher, I know who I am. You murdered them people. I never killed nobody. I didn't kill Fowler. And I didn't kill Toots. And I didn't kill Margaret. And I didn't kill Cruzmark. I didn't kill no one.
I'm afraid you did, Johnny.
My name's not Johnny.
All killed by your own hand. Guided by me, naturally.
I know who I am.
However cleverly you sneak up on a mirror, your reflection always looks you straight in the eye.
I know who I am.
It's pretty intense when he's looking in the mirror and saying, I know who I am, and he's crying. But I couldn't help but think about Sergeant Lincoln Osiris.
I know who I am. I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude.
I know who I am.
I know who I am.
I know who I am.
Mickey Rourke played it off a lot better.
I thought it was an extremely well acted scene.
You're killing it with this scene. Even though I kind of figured out the plot, just the performance of this Harry Angel versus Johnny Favorite conflict within the acting of Mickey Rourke, I thought was very well done.
Top notch.
He goes back to the hotel where Epiphany was. Shocker, she's now dead.
She been dead.
And this was another gruesome murder involving genitalia.
Yeah, he put his gun right up the hoo-ha. And then we can kind of go back to when we saw the sex scene that she was screaming in pain.
Yes, and it seems like, maybe that wasn't fun sexy time. Maybe that was really bad sexy time.
I would say it was definitely bad sexy time.
It was for 100%
One,
very
it
bad.
was incest.
And two, it was definitely assault.
Yes.
The racist detectives are there, and they're like, you're going to burn for this. Harry/Johnny says, yeah, I'm going to burn in hell. And then we end on the devil baby, which freaked me out, actually. It was very unsettling.
Was not expecting it.
Epiphany's
Epiphany's
kid,
child. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Epiphany's child looks at him. One of the detective comes out of the bathroom holding the baby, and he's like shocked. Like, why is the baby here?
Wait,
and
why was the baby there? I thought she said, I left him alone with my auntie or something.
Well, we can get into this.
Okay.
The baby's there, and then the baby looks at him and then gets these devil eyes that we saw on Cypher earlier and points at him. And that's how it ends.
Oh, yeah. And so maybe that's like a, haha, I got you, bitch.
Gotcha, bitch.
Like I knew this the whole time. I'm the devil.
Well, it kind of goes back to we brought up earlier how she didn't know who the father was, and it was kind of like an immaculate. It was the spawn of Satan. Her baby's the spawn of Satan.
That sucks.
Johnny Favorite made this deal with him. He didn't go through with the deal, so Satan banged his daughter. That's pretty much what happened.
Man, this guy is the devil, literally.
But that's all I have.
That wraps up the plot.
Plot talk.
What a interesting ride here. Now, let's get into some nitpicks.
Nitpicks.
I'm looking at your first one here. Why don't you share it with the audience?
So this is not a nitpick. I just don't like that he banged his kid.
No, nobody does.
The whole time you're like, please don't, please do not.
My nitpick, which is in line with what a nitpick is, and it has to do with big twist movies, is the expository scenes. So that scene with Connie where she's dumping all this information. Do I need to take all this in real time? Because not everybody can do this. And
right.
At the end, when Ethan explains the whole big reveal, I want to know, and I want you to lead me all the way up until that point with a mystery. But I don't know how I feel. On the other side of things, I feel like it's so much information, and sometimes it can be convenient. We did this with Minority Report, when they were doing the big reveal in the banquet room and they were showing all this footage. Like, I don't know. It's like, do I want to chew on it for a little bit and then figure it out at the very end? Or do I want the big
aha moment?
Oh, this is how this happened and this is how this happened. So I love mystery stories and I love a big twist and a reveal, but I don't know. I think the reveal has to be done very well.
Yes.
For the info dumps in the scene. It's just it's something that is tricky to pull off.
Not weird. It was definitely different the way that the reveal was, because they gave you enough information where the audience knew the reveal. We didn't quite know how it happened, but we know that Harry is Johnny, or they're one and the same. Their soul is one and the same. And then we're left with that really interesting point at the end where the whole time we're all in the dark together, and then the audience learns something that the main character doesn't know. I usually really love that. And so I will say, while it gave us all that expository information, I'm not necessarily upset at how it was obtained, right? Like, okay, a private detective has a confidential informant of some sort. I get it. It was a lot to give in a very short period of time. I agree with you there. But I think in the end, it was a lot easier to get it because we pretty much already kind of knew how it all went down. Not the voodoo devil magic eating some guy's heart and assuming the identity.
Like a very airtight explanation will justify those information dump scenes for me. It's a little bit trickier with mythological and satanic activities involved because you could just make up your own rules at that point.
Yeah.
If it were just based in things that everybody can understand in the realm of reality, and he had a really airtight explanation and explained it all at the end, then that's where I think it's done well. It's really more the reason and the believability of it. I think it's a tough thing to pull off, and I don't expect it to go over well 100% of the time when I'm watching one of these M. Night Shyamalama Ding Dong type movies where they say, this is the big twist. And you're like, oh my God, how'd that happen? And they explain it and you're like, oh, well, there's this plot hole, this plot hole, this plot hole, this plot hole. Like, how do you explain all this?
Yeah, I had another nitpick, and I'm kind of, as we talk through the movie, it's less of a nitpick for me. I think I'm just working through how the whole soul switch worked. So the whole amnesia / shell shock, they mention it from the war, but I'm not sure how satisfying that is. Johnny kidnaps Harry, eats his heart, takes his soul, and then I think you're right. I think he's going to assume his identity, but then gets shipped off to war, hits his head, and gets amnesia. So he doesn't remember who he is, and then he has facial reconstruction. And the only people who know who he is are Margaret and Ethan, her dad, and they're going to go break him out. I feel, and that's kind of my nitpick. I feel like that timeline between, okay, you ate this dude's heart, and now you are Harry believing you're a private detective. I think that timeline could have been fleshed out. Maybe it was in a scene that was really intense and they explained it and I missed it. I don't know if that was part of Ethan's explanation, but I don't feel like as a viewer, I was necessarily left with a satisfying answer to that. But that's my last nitpick.
That relates to not really a nitpick, but it will transition into a talking point, which is taking a story from a novel and putting it into a movie. I feel like there's a lot of things that go unexplained, like the dead body in the beginning, who the figure in all black is. So let's get into our talking points here. Who do we think the figure in black was? Is this some sort of person we're supposed to know? And it might just be a reference to the book.
It could be a reference to the book. I'd say it's probably, if I had to say it was a symbol, probably a symbol of judgment, right? Because it was right when bad things were happening. We were learning more evidence that Harry was Johnny. Basically, like your time's running out and judgment's coming.
Now, you have seen this movie before, but it's been a long time, and I think there's a lot to miss unless you retain the big twist and the big reveal. Is there a difference watching it this time around for you?
I remembered almost literally nothing except for Robert De Niro was Satan. And I remember there being a twist. So I went into the movie thinking there's a twist I have to figure out.
Oh, well, that's cool for you because you know it's going to be something juicy, but you forgot what it was.
Yeah, and I actually watched it twice this week leading up to this podcast.
Oh,
Because this is definitely one of those movies where when you watch it a second time, you can go back and be like, oh, this is when this happened. And so you can come up with a lot of theories about how it all went down. So like what I thought was interesting watching it a second time was that everyone he killed, you notice he touches the murder weapon beforehand. So when he's in the doctor's house, he looks in his nightstand and he grabs the gun and he checks it and then he puts it back in the nightstand. And then the doctor conveniently shoots himself.
right.
When he walks into Margaret's office, he picks up the knife that she ends up being cut open with and just kind of checks it out and then puts it back in. My theory is that all the interactions that he had with the folks who died never happened. I actually believe he killed them on the spot when he saw them because he didn't need any of the information. He was just playing those conversations in his head because he already knew what they were going to tell him. He is Johnny.
Because he thought he was Harry Angel.
Right. So that's why when he went back to check on them, they were dead. They'd been dead for a while. He killed them the first time.
And that goes back to the epiphany scene where it's the montage. It looks like she's in extreme pain when they're having sex. But then there's a scene the next morning where she's in the bathtub. She's fine. And the next time we see her, she's back on the bed, a bloody mess, and she's dead. So I had that same thought too. Was that just in his head? Is he kind of schizophrenic? Is he just trying to convince himself that this is not what's happening? He's having some sort of dissociative identity disorder.
Like a psychotic break. Yeah. So when she was in the bathtub the next morning, she's humming a song. And he goes, "Where'd you hear that?" And he goes, "Oh, my mom taught it to me." So that's a memory he has of Evangeline humming that song. I think it's all playing in his head.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
The only murder weapon I don't recall him touching was whatever gun he used to kill Epiphany with.
Is he just packing heat? That's just his?
I don't think he has a gun throughout the movie, so that one's really interesting to me. Because the funniest one was the one he killed Ethan with, was before they walked into the room for the big reveal, he dropped something in the gumbo, and then Ethan dies via gumbo.
Ethan has the most delicious death. This is like a 300-gallon bucket of gumbo in this random shack.
Rich people in Louisiana making giant, delicious gumbo.
Fucking throw some crawdads.
Doing some crawfish out the patio. Maybe some crab apples.
So I don't think the big reveal even ever really happened. I think as soon as they went in that house, he drowned Ethan in the gumbo, and then the rest of that conversation played in his head. Right? There's no new information to him.
Because if he's Johnny and if he's Harry, it's Johnny telling Harry in his own brain like what's happening. And I think if that's in the book, I think that's a really good storytelling tool. It's juicy, it's fun. If you're watching this as a movie and you need to interpret that, I think that's a fun thing to discover.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of that in this movie. It had like I said, it was almost an indie movie, right? It was almost art house in a way, which is usually not my cup of tea. But
well, speaking of artsy fartsy, Lisa Bonet, who people our age might know as Zoe Kravitz's mom, because
yes,
that's like our generation. But if you grew up watching The Cosby Show, she was on The Cosby Show. Now, Nick, it's rumored that she may have been outed from The Cosby Show because of this film. Do you think that's true?
It definitely played a factor. I know she went I don't want to say off the wagon at all. She just went and did her own
She's
thing
a free
and
spirit.
was very free and open.
Yeah, so she's on The Cosby Show playing a daughter of a middle-class family. Bill Cosby is a doctor. It's a family-friendly comedy sitcom. And she goes off. She's doing like nude shoots for magazines. She's appearing in this super racy-ass film with questionable age difference, sex and incest and blood and murder.
And we're seeing her boobies.
And there's always all these rumors about Bill Cosby and Lisa Bonet butting heads, whether it was professionally or creatively. Interestingly enough, this movie I never heard of, I think did play a role in her kind of being phased out of The Cosby Show.
Turns out Bill Cosby had no room to speak.
She's quoted to say, yeah, he had evil, sinister energy, just like the devil in this movie.
Just like the devil.
Going to wrap up some talking points for this very interesting watch. We both came to the same conclusion. Was this movie ruined from modern day twist movies that we have seen before this one? This movie came out in 1987, and if I watched it back then, I would have thought, oh shit, it was him the whole time. But I was born in the 90s, same with you. We grew up watching plenty of twist movies like The Sixth Sense or Shutter Island or fill in the blank for the 6 other ones. So I think back in the 80s, when you're really trying to leave some big, easy breadcrumbs for the audience, and us these days already watching a million twist movies where he was actually crazy the whole time, we kind of put that together pretty quickly. We were talking off screen beforehand. I said I didn't know if I found it satisfying to figure it out as the movie was playing out, or if I felt like it ruined it. Because usually I am slow. I am slow to the game. I am last to the finish line when it comes to these complex storytelling mystery movies, and I have to watch it 4 times. Whereas this one, I got it right away. So I couldn't tell if I was happy with figuring it out or if it was a hollow victory because I knew what the big reveal was going to be at the end.
I'll say 2 things to that. One, I think it's okay because I'd like to think I still would have figured it out in 1987. I think Nick and James in 1987 would have got it. The second thing that I'd say is, you like referenced M. Night Shyamalan.
Shyamalama Ding Dong.
I feel like in like those movies, the twist is the point of the movie. And with Angel Heart, I feel like once I figured it out, it did not stop my enjoyment of the story or wanting to know a little more of how it happened. Like I think the story was compelling enough where it doesn't matter if you know the twist or not. It was still a good movie, in my opinion. It was good enough to be watchable without the twist propping it up.
You're putting respect where respect is earned by this insane movie.
It was a little on the nose sometimes, and I think that was intentional, especially if it's from a book, right? A lot of books you'll see write characters with names that are very obviously connected to something. Louis Cypher, that might have been a little on the nose. I do appreciate at the end during the reveal, once Harry puts it all together, he actually calls it out and it's not awkward. Like I never would have guessed. He like says it out loud. He goes, Lucifer.
Lucifer. Even your name is a dime store joke.
I appreciate that you said that because it was kind of an elephant in the room where he's like, oh, I finally got it. Ha ha ha. Very funny.
A nitpick that I also erased or eliminated from the list, which was the devil's intentions. I thought, why would he hire this person if he needed this mystery solved? But he didn't need the mystery solved. It was just a sick and twisted form of punishment because he's like so giddy at the end because he got him. He got Johnny and he made him basically go through hell. Have you seen the movie Oldboy?
Yes.
The Korean one?
Yes.
Actually, yeah, no, it was exactly like that. I was going to say there's a difference with that one and this movie because the main character ends up having sex with his daughter unknowingly. In Oldboy, it's some sick, demented person who he's playing a super long game and wants to seek revenge on the main character. So he sets up all these things and makes him fall in love with his daughter. And then in this movie, I was going to say, oh, it's just kind of by circumstance, but I don't think it was. I think the devil was lighting Johnny's path the whole way. Yeah. And he did the same thing. Like, oh, guess what? Try to screw me out of the deal. I will I will tear out your heart and stomp on it and enjoy it. When I realized he was the devil, I was like, what? Isn't he all knowing? And shouldn't he know where this Johnny is? But he was just fucking with Harry the whole time. That becomes clear at the end of the movie.
Yeah. Leading him on, offering him more money to keep investigating. But the thing I still can't figure out is the dog tags. Because he had the dog tags when he went to Margaret's place and he broke that vase open and he found his dog tags. Then when he went to the hotel room to find Epiphany, she was laying dead on the bed with Harry's dog tags on her. Did he have the dog tags the whole time?
Maybe this is in the book about imagining scenes that are not actually in reality and they just play out in his sick mind. But maybe it wasn't Harry figuring out that the dog tags are in Margaret's office. He's like, oh, I guess I'll go over to Margaret's and see if that's real. No, Johnny knows that's the case. So maybe Johnny grabbed them when he initially killed Margaret and then was like, here, Epiphany, wear my dog tags while we bang. This movie is, it's tripping me out, man. So let's get into our final review of this movie.
Final review. Fight.
Now the other guys, Rotten Tomatoes, 82% of the critics thought that this was a good movie. Thumbs up. And 81% of the audience also thought this was a good movie. So this is a rare
agreement.
1 percentile of critics versus audience. So you'll love to see that. Metacritic, however, I don't know if they're taking these from older reviews, like when it first came out, because I know when it first came out, this isn't something that people would be like, yeah, I want to go see this and have a good time. It's a 61 score from Metacritic out of 100.
It is.
The users on Metacritic, however, give it a 7.7, and IMDb has it rated at a 7.2.
Minus Metacritic, but everybody's high 70s, low 80s.
There's not that much difference from the lowest score to the highest score. It's pretty, in the grand scheme of things, it is pretty close. But if I were in the 80s and I were trying to pitch this movie, I'd say, listen, there's going to be 2 movies in the future that will blow your mind. One's called Shutter Island and the other one's called Oldboy. And I want to make a 1950s noir detective movie with chickens galore. What do you say?
Son of a bitch, I'm in. Yeah, I went similar to you. I said, how about some Sin City vibes in a Shutter Island story? I said, let's add in some voodoo Satanism for good measure. Mickey Rourke.
Now, Nick, why don't you give us your log line and your popcorn points?
All I said was an overly obvious Satan offers a job to a private detective, Harry Angel.
I'm glad that you left the twist out of it. I did the same.
Here's the setup, and then we'll let the story tell you the rest. I don't need it takes a somber turn. My review of this movie, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I liked this. I did. It may have telegraphed a bit, and maybe that's due to the movies we've seen. But like I said earlier, I was still drawn into the movie, even after I knew the twist. I still really liked the story. I think you said at the top of this that the actors probably really liked the material, and so they were definitely down to be a part of this, even though it wasn't kind of your high-budget, action-y, big-star movie. I found myself invested in the stories and characters. And one thing we alluded to a bit, but I think this was acted extremely, extremely well. Extremely well. Mickey Rourke, again, we see him today. He's kind of become a little more of an action star. You see him in Iron Man 2. He's been around in The Expendables. He did really well in The Wrestler, but I think you forget some of these guys when they were younger were really, really, really strong actors. De Niro's always going to be De Niro. Lisa Bonet did great, and the rest of the cast I thought was A+ stuff. So this really checked all my boxes. Not a ton of nitpicks, so I gave this an 8.6.
Nice. I can respect it.
I went 8.6 because War Games was 8.5, and this is definitely better than War Games.
Oh.
And if we ever go back and redo, I think I gotta punch down a little bit on War Games.
Okay. I mean, when you're just starting out, you don't have a lot of points of reference. So when we are watching all these movies and we have a whole list of ratings, and then you kind of have more points of reference to go back to and think, oh, I thought this was better than this, but I didn't think it was better than that.
Kind of chickenhole yourself a little bit.
If you will, chickenhole yourself. That will transition nicely into my honest log line. A 1950s chicken-fearing private detective is hired by the devil to find a crooner and unknowingly bangs his kid. I gave this 7.5 popcorn points.
Right in line.
I was looking at War Games as a reference. I was kind of looking like, where are my 3/4 of the way, not quite there yet, movies? So War Games I gave a 7.7, and I don't know if it's because I like the tone and the 80s, like War Games is an 80s movie. There is old ass computers. There's Matthew Broderick being a clown in high school, outrageous decision making rationality from the adults and the kids. But it's a fun movie and it has a pretty good message. Lots of plot holes though. This movie, I thought it was really good, and it sucks because, like we said before, I feel like I would enjoy this immensely back in the day because of the big twist, but it's not its fault really. But my reaction to it was, I don't want to say underwhelming, but the big twist is super telegraphed. and you know Robert De Niro's the devil. There's all these obvious clues, and it's just shocking that I actually figured this one out. All in all, I did enjoy this watch, and people may not realize this, but I do enjoy twisted things. For all the Marvel and Star Wars, most things work out for your hero in the end. Stuff that I like, I do find sick and twisted things very entertaining.
Yeah, I'm a huge psychological thriller guy.
Yeah, we love that, except for not Hulk, because apparently that's what that movie was supposed to be.
Swing and a miss.
Yeah, just the telegraph moves of the big reveal and the over explanation of information all at once. Like I said, you really got to do it very well in order for it to really hit home and hit hard. I don't know about you, but when you watched Shutter Island, I called that out too. I was like, I bet Leonardo DiCaprio is crazy and he's looking for himself. Did you think that too? Or was it like, what at the end?
It took me a little while to get there. It definitely got to a point though, because see, that's the flip side of not explaining things up front, right? Those scenes is you end up just going on this goose chase where like, at some point down the road, you go like, okay, I figured it out. We can stop going on this goose chase. It's a double-edged sword, right? Either you give all the information and you do what Angel Heart did and you just live with that, or you have this super linear story where it's follow this lead, follow this lead, follow this lead. You figured it out? I don't care. Follow this lead, follow this lead. And that could be dangerous too.
Tough to say. Looking at this retroactively, pretty easy to call in this day and age. With that, it's not like a movie that's like a fun watch. I do like fucked up things like a sick mind would make up. I'm sure you and I would just have sick minds. Maybe we just like that.
We could.
And the tone it's like a noir film, and it's 1955, and it's based in kind of old timey, racist Southern parts, and it kind of gives off weird feelings. It's not like a fun watch.
It's uncomfortable watch for sure.
Just like the setting and the time period and the tone. So that's just another thing that just kind of knocked it down, since the other things didn't lift it up. But all in all, I really did like watching this movie, and I like uncovering stuff, and I like solving mysteries. I thought it was good. I would give it a thumbs up. Very well acted. Mickey Rourke, I didn't know you had the chops like that. I'm just used to seeing you in the back room saying little one-liners and acting all cool, but this is my first movie I watched with you, and as in a leading role, and I thought you killed it. No pun intended.
Absolutely. Well, that's Angel Heart.
And that is our review. Please join us next week as we review our very first sequel to a movie that we have reviewed before.
Can't wait.
Adios, muchachos.